Good evening. Welcome. You're on the air once again. We're on the air once again for another episode of Pachios on the News. And I'm excited about tonight's program. Our guest is a gentleman named Fateh Azzem. He's a Palestinian American. I think I said that properly. A Palestinian American, and a very knowledgeable fellow, very active in a lot of organizations. And he's here because I wanted to know more about the main coalition for Palestine, and we were put on to him because we were looking for somebody from that organization. But as it turns out, I'm delighted that he's the fellow they chose to send over here, because he's a knowledgeable guy. He's paid a lot of attention to Palestinian history, the history of his people, and he's a graduate of the University of Massachusetts, got a master's degree in England, I think, Essex University?
Essex University.
He is, if I were, he would probably correct me on this. I don't know him very well. I've just met him not long ago. But if I were to characterize him in a way that maybe he would appreciate, I would say he's a human rights activist. Is that a good term?
Absolutely a good term. That's what I call myself.
That's what you call yourself? Yeah. All right. Well, I hit one out of the ballpark anyway. So, Fateh, we're talking a little bit about your background. Tell us, were you born in this country?
No.
Okay, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I was born 2 years after the Nakba. The Nakba, for us Palestinians,
catastrophe.
Is Arabic for catastrophe,
right?
Which is the dispossession from Palestine, the destruction of Palestinian society. And we became stateless refugees. And I was born 2 years into that state of being stateless refugee.
Where were you born?
I was born in Lebanon, grew up in Syria, and then in Lebanon, 8 years each. And the family immigrated to the U.S. in 1966. So
I think upstate New York, huh?
Yeah, we moved initially to upstate New York, and we spent some time there. I went to finish my high school, 1 year of high school there.
Yeah.
And then graduated and went to college in Troy for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then we moved on. Yeah, so I became a citizen here in Portland, Maine in 1978.
You were sworn in here in Portland?
Right here in Portland. At that time, I was living in South Paris.
You were living in you were a performer, weren't you?
I was, with Celebration of Mime Theater, Tony Montanero's.
And Tony Montanero is a very well-known guy.
Yes.
And so you came here to participate in mime theater?
Essentially, yeah. I came here to take workshops with Tony in mime and became a member of his group.
What does a person involved in mime call themselves? What's the title? Mimist?
A mime.
A mime. A mime.
I am a mime. I was a mime. Yeah.
You still do some performances on the side?
Not so much in mime, but I've done some theater. Yeah. And I've written a couple of plays. I did a production of Waiting for Godot with some friends in Brunswick at the Theater Projects a few years ago.
Yeah.
So I keep my fingers in, and most recently, last year, we did a production of the Gaza Monologues, which is a series of individual writings by youth in Gaza after another war in Gaza in 2008, 2009.
Was this recently that you did that? Yeah.
It was performed at Bowdoin and at the Unitarian Church in Part. Yeah. And at Space right here in Portland.
So I want to disclose at the outset, we're going to have a discussion, as we always do. Those of you who watch this show know it's just basically a relaxed discussion. Occasionally, people and the interlocutor, me, get excited about something, but we try not to get too excited.
I'll try not to get too excited either.
Yeah, well, but we're going to talk about Palestine, Israel, the Palestinians and it's a hot subject. And I want to disclose at the beginning, for your benefit, Tata, I think you may already know this, and for the audiences, that I have a little bit of a history and perhaps a bias in this, not a bias toward one side or another, but a bias toward a solution and so forth that I suspect my guest may not agree with in all respects. But I at Princeton University, where I got my bachelor's degree, every undergraduate was required to write a thesis, and it really was pretty much your entire grade for your senior year. And it's a big project. And I wrote mine, it was only 10 years after the creation of Israel, and I wrote mine on America's role in the creation of Israel, which was an interesting subject because the State Department was against it and against recognition. The president was for it, some other politicians were for it. So that's what and I interviewed a lot of people in Washington to produce this. So I had an interest in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Later on, I worked in Washington and ultimately at one point I became chairman of the United States Commission on Public Diplomacy and went to the Middle East several times, to Israel and to Arab states. And so I tried to learn some things there, and it formed, I formed some opinions. So the basic one is I am opposed to the occupation, and I am for two states, which I'm not sure you are, but I am for a two-state solution, and I recognize the difficulty in achieving a two-state solution. That's pretty much where I come from. So let's first talk about what I was particularly interested in before I met you. I said, well, this guy can tell us a lot about the history of the area. The name of the organization is Main Coalition for Palestine, and you're a member of that organization.
That's right.
And who are they?
Yeah, it's a group of volunteers who have come together. We started coming together probably about a month after October 7th, as we saw the kind of response that Israel was perpetrating in Gaza, the destruction, the level of destruction, the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. So a number of people that got together and spurred on by some history for some of them, like one of the main members of the coalition is the Main Voices for Palestinian Rights, and they've been around quite a long time in advocating for Palestinian rights and Palestinian liberation. As you know, the history for us didn't start on October 7th for Palestine. It started way before. And this war is the last and the most brutal in a series of wars, starting from 2000 and before, from the occupation in 1967, to be honest. So these people got together and we started organizing to advocate for a ceasefire, that this kind of killing has to stop. That was our first big demand. Stop the killing, stop the murder. And then as the scale of the murder was the savagery was so huge.
You don't call this a war, you call it murders. Because they don't have murders and wars.
Well, we'd call it murders when we were talking about that level of civilian casualty. We were talking about such massive violations of humanitarian law and of human rights that it actually reached the level of genocide. And over time, just to finish the thought, over time, it became very clear. It was, I myself was reluctant initially. I know my own daughter says, why aren't you saying it's genocide? I said, well, in international law, there are criteria, there are levels, there are, thresholds that need to be met. Well, soon after I said that to my own daughter, I realized I was wrong. The threshold had been met. And hundreds of legal experts, all of the UN basically came through and said, this is meeting the threshold of genocide. And the International Court of Justice, even though it hasn't ruled on the genocide yet, did say in its decision, in the earlier decision, that it is plausible that what Israel is doing is reaching the level of genocide, and Israel had better scale back and ratchet down, which it didn't do.
I don't want to get off on
yeah.
the subject
Sure.
at this point, because I want to ask more about the organization, but what you just said brought something to mind, that's definition of genocide. The United States Air Force killed tens of thousands of Germans in daily raids over German cities, civilians, killed civilians. Would that qualify as genocide?
Not when the intention is to, it requires the intention to eliminate the entire people as a people, or in whole or in part, right? So that would not have defined, because that was war, and it was war conducted without yet the benefit of humanitarian law, which was put together in 1949, that says you cannot be doing this. The Genocide Convention was promulgated and came into force in 1948, 3 years after the end of World War II. And it was because of the savagery of World War II, including the Holocaust, that humanitarian law, the four Geneva Conventions, and other conventions like the Genocide Convention and others, the Racism Convention, and all of the human rights instruments we have today, is because of that kind of brutality that said that the international community at the time said, never again can we allow this to happen. Well, now look at Gaza.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm listening and I'm agreeing with you, and then I go back to my favorite subject, human nature, and there's still in this world a huge amount of brutality.
Yes.
And in fact, Hamas gave us a lot of evidence of brutality when they came across and got civilians, children, women, so forth, and killed them and abused them. So a lot of people are responsible for inhumane acts on this earth.
And a number of Hamas commanders were, indicted by the International Criminal Court alongside Netanyahu and Gallant too. So I mean,
at the same time that Netanyahu,
when the indictment came out against Netanyahu and Gallant, it also included Yahya Sinwar, and I can't remember the second person from Hamas who was also indicted.
Okay, all right. So back to the organization, which I just want to learn a little bit more before we go on. It's not the kind of the organizations today are on the internet.
Sure.
You don't go into a big hall and say, here we are and let's vote.
Yeah. Well, you know, Harold, it's not an organization.
Yeah.
It's a coalition.
Okay.
It's a group of people that have come together that have that specific purpose, called the Main Coalition for Palestine, to advocate for Palestinian rights, for the liberation of Palestine, and to end the genocide, for a ceasefire now, and for a change. So it is composed of, right now, about 20 organizations, plus dozens and dozens and dozens of individuals. We have mailing lists that reach a lot of people, thousands of people in Maine. And when we call for a rally, for example, we can have a rally in Bangor that only 100 people show up, and we can do one in Portland with 200 people, or we can do one in Brunswick with 10. Doesn't matter. So we have a lot do different organizations.
How do you call for? Use the internet to call for a rally?
Yeah, we use these organizing chat applications.
Something chat. Yeah.
So basically we say, okay, there's this thing happening. Everybody. So it's like a call to action.
Social media.
Social media. Yeah.
I don't know anything. I know the phrase.
Right.
It's about all I know about it.
Well, it took me some learning to learn how to join them with that too.
So it's kind of loose. It's a coalition.
Yeah.
You use the internet to organize. You have a website.
Yeah, the website is minimal. It's basically just describes.
It isn't much, not much in the website.
Yeah.
But there's a historical thing. You might have written it on the website. If you're interested in the history of the Palestinian issue, is a lengthy historical note in there, many pages, too long for me to read. You might have had something to do with it. And I'm interested in this, and the people will be interested in this. The idea with protests is to influence public opinion. I mean, why bother doing it if you're not going to influence public opinion? And this is an area that I know something about because I've spent most of my life as an adjunct politician. And it's what I tell the lefties about defund the police. You want to get somebody like Donald Trump elected? Go talk about how you want to defund the police. So it's all about what you present. And with any organization, you're happy to have all the support you can get. But I think you got to get a little more of the moderate type.
So are you, can you point to something we're doing or saying that's a little bit too radical for your taste? Or?
Yeah, too radical. Too radical for me, Fateh.
Okay, all right. That's fine.
The website has 9 member organizations.
That needs to be updated, but yeah.
Okay, and then it has 8,
endorsing
14 endorsing organizations.
Right.
Of the 9, I'm trying to be helpful here, you know.
Sure.
This is free advice I'm giving you.
All right.
But of the 9, it includes Party for Socialism and Liberation. It includes the Communist Party of Maine. It includes the Maine Democratic Socialists. It includes the Freedom Road Socialist Organization of Maine. That's almost half the men. Well, go get some. There are Republicans around, you know, that would agree with you. And so that's a little free advice. And you don't have to get in a conversation with me about it. But I try to be helpful to the guests. I try to be.
I'll tell you what, Harold. Why don't you join the coalition? You know, and then we can have that discussion as a member of the coalition.
As a contributor, as somebody that contributes some ideas.
You're welcome.
But in the meantime,
as long as you subscribe to what we're working for, which is the liberation of Palestine, and the end of genocide.
Well, I'm for the end of genocide.
Right, good.
God forbid these folks that watch every month think that I'm for genocide. No, I'm against genocide. I'm against the occupation. Good. I'm for a Palestinian state, okay? But we're still probably not for the exact same things. Because
we have some differences there.
But I try not to join too many organizations at my age, but bring back to the group my ideas. Broaden it. You're trying to persuade people. You're trying to influence people. And defund the police didn't influence enough people. It influenced them the wrong way. That's all I'm saying. So let's get back to what we're going to talk about. You don't mind me giving free advice, do you? And you didn't show up to get advice. You showed up to state your case.
Yeah, but get to the point where you ask me what my case is.
Okay. So let me, to get this started on your case, let me read something to you and then ask, get your reaction to it. This is what I happen to like this. You may not. You may like parts and not like parts. But this is from one of my favorite books. It's a book written by a journalist of a liberal newspaper. He calls it a left-wing paper. Is it in Jerusalem? Haaretz?
Haaretz, yeah.
Yeah, Haaretz.
In Hebrew, it means the land.
Okay. And his name is Ari Shavit, and he wrote a book in 2013 called My Promised Land, which is not a hopeful book, but he's a struggling guy. He really struggles with all of this. And as he says, as malignant as it is, the occupation has become an integral part of the Jewish state's being. It has also become an integral part of my life as an Israeli. Although I oppose the occupation, I am responsible for the occupation. I cannot deny the fact or escape the fact that my nation has become an occupying nation. And he says, and this is the catalyst for our discussion in a way, Only a few years ago did it suddenly dawn on me that my existential fear of being, eliminated regarding my nation's future and my moral outrage, up your alley, my moral outrage regarding my nation's occupation policy, those two things are not unconnected. On the one hand, Israel, the only nation in the West that is occupying another people, the only Western nation. On the other hand, Israel is the only nation in the West that is existentially threatened. Both occupation and intimidation make the Israeli condition unique. Intimidation and occupation have become the two pillars of our condition. And I'll finish. Most observers and analysts, he's talking about Israelis, deny this duality. The ones on the left address occupation and overlook intimidation. The ones on the right address intimidation and dismiss occupation. But the truth is that without incorporating both elements into action, incorporating both elements into a worldview, one cannot grasp Israel or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Any school of thought that does not relate seriously to these two fundamentals is bound to be flawed and futile. Only a third approach that internalizes both intimidation and occupation can be realistic and moral. Duality. You recognize the duality?
No.
Okay.
I don't, because I think it's a false duality.
Uh-huh.
I think it's an escapist duality. It's one that has not yet recognized and accepted fundamental humanity of everybody. It's a duality that is built on the notion that somehow his existential fear is of what? Being destroyed as a tribal Jewish entity.
Yeah.
Well, what about 30% of the population that live in Israel that are not Jewish? Somehow that doesn't belong to them. They're excluded from that. The idea, he's trying to justify living with the duality of wanting to be moral and being against the occupation without actually recognizing the humanity of not only the occupied, but of the equality of the occupied and of his own citizens with himself.
Well, if he's against the occupation and the occupation ends, what's the problem if the occupation ends?
Well, the problem is that most of the people occupied, half of them are from where he lives, near Tel Aviv and in Haifa and in Nazareth and Safad and Ashkelon and the 530 villages that Zionist Israel destroyed between 1948 and 1954. If you don't recognize that, it's not an occupation of something different. It is an occupation of the fundamental land that he calls Israel now, as well as what we refer to in our discussions as historic Palestine, what Palestine always was, from the river to the sea. So from the river to the sea, where everybody, in my personal human rights view, says everybody can live as equal citizens before the law. States don't have a right to exist. People have a right to exist. And people can define for themselves together, if they respect each other's equality and dignity, how their state and their nation and their political collectivity can look like.
How you say that they can define for themselves
in people.
How can they bring that about?
That's what we have democracy and the concept of democracy for, isn't it? And that's what we have.
You say you have a
democratic.
First of all, you have a constitution. You vote on the constitution.
Yeah.
You have to vote to adopt it.
Yeah.
Some, and they're not all going to agree. So you're going to have a vote, and the majority is going to win.
Yeah, I mean, this is what democracy is about, right?
Yeah.
as long as we are all citizens of the same political entity, and we can all equally vote and debate and have parties and have like what happened in New York. Why shouldn't what happened in New York and what's happening, the referendums that were just passed or rejected in Maine, why can't that happen in Palestine?
Anything is possible,
Yeah.
but we have to be realists. We have to recognize that we have a 250-year experience in this country with democracy, constitutional democracy, and in the region where Israel exists, there is no such tradition.
Well, there is such a tradition for Jews. They seem to have a pretty vibrant democracy for Jews in Israel.
I was
but not
about to
for
say,
including. Yeah.
there is no tradition except for that in the
Right.
Jewish state.
There you go. Yeah. No, not in the Jewish state, sorry. For Jews in Israel. Because for the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, they are subject to at least 65 discriminatory laws that puts them in second and third class citizenship. And most recently, in 2018, the Knesset passed the nation-state bill, which means what? That the right to self-determination is exclusive to the Jewish people in the state of Israel. What does that mean for equality?
It's not quite. I understand your point, but it's not the Arabs, the Palestinians in Israel can vote. They can elect. They have their own parties. They can elect people to the Knesset that you just mentioned. So
But they can't marry somebody from the West Bank and bring that spouse to live with them. They can't.
Okay.
They will have to leave the country to go there. Okay. That's only one of the discriminatory
I
law
understand
of this.
I understand what you're saying, but we're talking about how you manage a country, and you said, well, we do it here. And I'm saying, yeah, but most places in the world, they don't do it.
Harold, from mandate years, from the 1920s, the Palestinian leadership, when the country was a whole, all of the historic what we call mandate Palestine, that the British were in control of, were demanding secular democratic state with a government that is representative of the people, with equal rights to vote of everybody that was there. And that demand has not wavered since then. When the PLO was formed, their demand as the Palestine Liberation Organization was to create a secular democratic state in Palestine. They didn't say Muslim state. They didn't say Arab state. They said a secular democratic state. So I mean, we've been demanding this forever, for 100 years, And my research, you read the piece I wrote on that, has shown that.
Let's go back to the duality, which you don't agree with.
I don't agree with that kind of, like false morality, I call it.
Well, false morality. But what about the duality? Do you think that there's any basis for Jews to feel insecure in the absence of a Jewish state?
No, because the whole thrust after World War II and after the Holocaust, throughout in the entire United Nations system and the community of states that were represented in the United Nations system, was to create human rights protections with the idea of racism. It has to be outlawed. Hate speech has to be outlawed. Equal rights for everybody. The civil and political rights have to be respected. Economic, social, and cultural rights have to be respected. The rights of minorities have to be respected. All of the international human rights instruments were designed so that we can actually use them as kind of a guidepost. And we judge nations by that. And I spent, and you rightly called me a human rights activist, because I spent all of my career, 35 years, doing this kind of work, starting with the Palestinian Human Rights Organization, which our Trump administration has now, the same organization I ran, is now calling a terrorist organization, right? So all of my work, including my work with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Office, is to promote this idea that human rights has to be the basis for governments, respect for human rights, including the right to participate in the conduct of public affairs,
And
which is
theoretically,
democracy.
you know, I agree with you. I'm just want to get to reality.
Sure, but
The duality includes intimidation. Do you think that Jews are mistaken when they perceive that they've been persecuted?
no, of course not. No, there's anti-Semitism. There's still anti-Semitism in this country. There's anti-Semitism all over Europe.
Yeah.
You know, not that long ago, we were talking about neo-Nazis and skinheads and what have
Right.
you, right? So, of course, anti-Semitism exists. But what is the guard against anti-Semitism? It is the insurance that people are protected from anti-Semitic attacks and that people have equal rights to organize and to be protected. That includes everybody, including Jews, including Muslims, including Arabs, including, you know, Indians, whatever, right? Including African Americans. They're still slogging after 200 and 400 years of slavery to get out of it, right? So, you know, it's not the question of whether or not you have been persecuted. The history is clear. The document is clear. And I've been to Auschwitz and I've seen what that means. I've seen what that means, right? But that does not mean, you know, that the lesson of never again should apply only to Jews. It means that the lesson of never again should apply to everybody, including us who are victims of the Holocaust as much as the Jews were.
Yeah, but I want to get back to the duality.
Well, yeah, but this is all part of the discussion. No?
It requires holding two disparate thoughts at the same time. One is that the Palestinians are oppressed. They have a big beef, okay, no question about it. And the other is, as he points out, this history of intimidation, this fear that, you know, we've had pogroms and we've had we've had attempts to eliminate Jews.
I understand that, yeah.
Long before the Holocaust, and we have political leaders in parts of the world who today say we got to get rid of the Jews. They say that. So that doesn't give people,
yeah, but
if you're Jewish,
Harold, what
you don't
he's
get
saying
a
then, what he's saying
secure
is
feeling.
that intimidation means that the only solution to that intimidation is to become an intimidator.
To become what?
An intimidator.
It's to become, it's powerful enough to defend yourself.
Yeah, but that also means that, you know, if you create what some, you know, Israeli and Jewish scholars have called a Jewish ghetto in Israel, you know, that's only going to keep the separation, to keep that difference out.
That's
you know,
a good
instead
point.
of
Look.
instead of creating a state where everybody has equal rights. Because I belong in Haifa and in Nazareth, where my family is from, as much as any Jew who came from Poland, if not more so. So just because I'm not Jewish,
Yeah.
I can't fit.
Yeah, look, I can't quarrel with what you say,
Well, then
except except that a Jew might say, well, 2,000 years ago, I belonged in Haifa too, along with you.
Fine.
Yeah,
Come.
I'm just saying.
Believe, no, that's what it is.
But you said more than some Jew from Poland. The fact is, that person might say, I have ancestors from Haifa,
That's
not
fine.
Poland.
The difference is that if that person had come and rented an apartment next to me and lived as my neighbor together with me, I would have no beef with that person. But I have a beef with that person who came and took my apartment and threw me out and said, you have no rights here, I have rights here that date back 2,000 years.
No question about it. I cannot quarrel with that point.
Yeah, but Harold, the point is that that continues. That didn't happen once in the past, 70 years ago. That continues. When I talk in my work about stateless refugees, stateless persons, There are 6 million stateless Palestinians today. That includes all of those in the West Bank and in Gaza. Okay? They are stateless. Why? Because they were driven out of their state, right? And never allowed to come back. And then they got occupied afterwards and never became citizens anyway. And here is Israel about to annex the West Bank and about to annex half of Gaza, right? And build their settlements there, you know? And we're seeing an ongoing, continuing Nakba, our continuing Holocaust.
I don't
And
disagree
he's
with
worried
you.
about the duality of feeling intimidated.
We're talking about solutions.
No, I'm going back to your Shavit person, right?
I
Ali
understand
Shavit.
that.
He's basically saying that this is all difficult for me, and I understand it's difficult, and I feel bad that I have to occupy other people, right? But you know, I have to you have to recognize that I am afraid, so I have to create a Jewish state.
No. He's not. I disagree with you. I don't think he's saying that.
All right.
I think he's saying, I am for dismantling all of the settlements. I am for creation of a sovereign Palestinian state, which will include Gaza and the West Bank. And in the West Bank, it'll be contiguous. It will be created for economic prosperity and so forth.
Okay,
but I want a Jewish state too, in another area.
Well, this is the problem. This is 2013, right?
Yeah.
We're now in 2025. The settlers are right now wreaking havoc in the West Bank together with the Israeli army. The plans are there, all laid out for the annexation of all of the settlements in the West Bank and all of the roads that leading up to them, and ending up with the little cages of Bantustans in Ramallah, in Nablus, in Jenin, in Bethlehem.
No question.
So why are we going back to Shavit from 2013?
Because, again, Shavit wants a solution. And
That's what I'm saying.
And it's not your preferred solution.
No, but that solution is a non-starter now.
Why?
Because it's too late now for that
Oh,
solution.
you're saying it's too late
now it's too late for that
dismantle the
solution.
settlements and to do all of that.
Yes.
If it is,
yes.
then what? If it's too late for that,
Secular democratic state in all of
it's
Palestine.
not too late for that?
No, it's not. It's not too late.
I don't understand why it's not too late for that.
Because Israel is planning to take the West Bank.
I understand.
Yeah, so what are we then expecting to happen?
But help me. Look, I'm truly trying to
Do
understand.
you want to go back to theoretically the idea of having a two-state solution, right? That's what you want to go back to.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm saying that's not viable anymore.
How will this happen? I'm thinking back to Northern Ireland and our own Senator George Mitchell and what he did in Northern Ireland. He didn't just. They didn't just sit back. He didn't sit back and say, "Okay, this is the way it's got to be." It's the art of the possible. Politics is the art of the possible. What's possible? And in order for something to be possible, there's got to be something in it for everyone. And that's what diplomacy is all about.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure that the state in the West Bank and Gaza is possible anymore. That's what I'm saying.
If it were possible, would you be okay with that? If it were possible?
I would be okay if it means all of the Israeli soldiers and all of the settlers are out and gone.
Yeah, gone.
Okay?
No occupation.
Right.
Gone.
I think personally, it's
Well, I understand
dreamland.
you think it's impossible.
But that would not end the problem. That's what I'm trying to say. It would not end the problem, because the problem is in having the idea of an exclusively Jewish state. That is the fundamental problem of Zionism.
How does that affect anybody else?
It affects 30% of their own population who are already officially citizens.
Well, look.
It affects all the refugees. It affects a historic injustice. Why is it? Let me say this, Harold.
Yeah.
Why is it that we can talk about justice and equality for everybody except the Palestinians? Why is it that we talk about Israel's right to defend
Who
itself?
said justice for everybody except the Palestinians?
No, I'm just saying in general. I'm not accusing you or anybody.
Just for the Palestinians. There are people who want to resolve this in a way that will help the Palestinians. There are people.
But what does that mean, help the Palestinians? That's what I'm trying to say. It does not help
Give
the
them
Palestinians.
a sovereign state to make their own decisions. Give them land and say, this is yours, sovereign state, make whatever decisions you want to make.
But that never was going to happen.
You keep saying it's never going to happen. I'm saying,
You keep hoping it's going to happen,
Well, there's a lot
Harold.
of things. I say it's never going to happen, that you're going to eliminate the Jewish state, at least in the near term, and have a secular state in which the Palestinians, because there is some tribalism there, the Palestinians run it. I say that's because of demographics, But so I say that's as impossible as what you say is impossible.
Yeah, but Harold, if you're thinking about human beings that are equal with equal rights, why do the demographics matter? Except for, Zionist ideology that says we are special, we are unique, we have to be especially protected because of our history of intimidation. Right?
Why do demographics matter?
If we're talking about
Human
people are
nature.
equal. Human nature, well, okay, it is also human nature to have created human rights law.
Look,
right?
Throughout that region, there are states that are not secular.
Right.
One state, Saudi Arabia, was established just 16 years before Israel was established, 1932. And that operates under what is called basic law, and basic law is the Quran. That's not secular.
Well, I don't think it's legitimate either. Any more legitimate than the Jewish state.
Right. I'm just saying, this is not the only example in that region.
Yeah, but I'm not saying it is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying, that entire region and all of the states were created as a colonial exercise, no more, no less.
True.
Right? All of these states were carved out to give specific families some dominions in order to ensure the flow of oil.
True.
So, Sykes-Picot and before.
True.
So, when we're talking about the specific area of Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, even into Iraq, that's the populated region, that's the region with the history of civilization that goes back thousands of years, and it's not only Jews that have been around for 2,000 years.
Who said that?
Right. Well, they do.
Oh, no, they do not say that. Listen, we're having a good conversation.
But Harold,
I've never heard that before.
Look, I'm trying to create this picture for you that civilization in that whole region is every single civilization, from the Egyptians to the Mongols to the Crusaders to whoever, have tromped through that area and took something and left something and took something and left something.
True.
Right?
That's true.
So the concept of having any one of those tribes, we say we're Canaanites, whatever that means. For me, it doesn't mean anything to go back 3,000 years and call myself a Canaanite. I live today. I live today in a culture. I grew up in a culture that is very rich and deep, that has poetry and music and etc. Right? So to me, today, I need to live, and I want my people to live as human beings equal with anybody else who's living with them. That our division into tribes, can only harm that. It can only harm that. That's the point I'm trying to make. And that, to me, the best hedge against that is to look at human rights, to look at the concept of equality without discrimination, to recognize the inherent humanity in everybody around you, and not to think, well, you know, I recognize your humanity, but, you know, I suffered, so therefore I have to be justified in not allowing your humanity to exist side by side with mine. I mean, this is basically the message I'm getting. This is the message I'm getting from the Zionist message of Israel. That's what it is. We have suffered pogroms and unspeakable horrors, and I agree, they have. And our solution is to create our Jewish state where we can protect Jews around the world. Well, you know, the majority of Jews do not live in Israel, and about half of the Jewish community, approximately, maybe a little bit less than half, not only in the US, but across the world, are saying, this is hurting us. Anti-Semitism is rising, in part, not entirely, in part, because of what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. So how are we going to solve that? We cannot just put it all aside and say, well, you know, let's have a nice rosy idea about, okay, the Palestinians can have their state, and the Jews can have their state, and everything will be fine. Everything will not be fine, because the Zionist idea of tribal definitions of how you organize your state in accordance with your tribal definition, right, will make that impossible in the future, and in the immediate and in the future. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it happen. You know, they're next to Golan Heights already. They're taking more than the Golan Heights. They're continuing to fight in South Lebanon. They have plans. There are plans for permanent presence in South Lebanon.
I don't want to get into a discussion about the present government in Israel and what their plans are.
It's not the present government. It's a long-term ideology in Zionism. It's not this present government.
Yeah.
You know, I remember very well Rabin, the champion of peace. I was there in the first Intifada. He gave the order, specifically, Harold, if you catch children throwing stones, break their bones. And I saw videos of soldiers holding children's hands, 11 and 12 years old, and hitting them with rocks to break them, because they're following orders.
I didn't know that. I have to look into that. I didn't know that.
But, you know,
but realistically, what are the steps needed to achieve your plan, which is one state, democracy? How do you get there?
It's hard. It's very hard. I'm not saying that it's going to get there tomorrow. I think, first of all, what is happening now, the government of Israel, whether it's Netanyahu or whoever comes after, I mean, the opposition to Netanyahu isn't that much better than him, frankly.
Opposition
to Netanyahu today is not that much better than Netanyahu. He's a bit more extreme and open about it. You know, the more center extreme.
So,
they have to be held.
There are no Israeli politicians that you think are
there are
decent.
Amazing Israeli activists on the ground. There are groups like Breaking the Silence. There are groups like Hamoked. There are human rights groups. Groups like the B'Tselem, with whom I would consider are my brothers and sisters, because I've worked with them in the human rights field. When I was at Al-Haq, now declared a terrorist organization by the Trump administration, I came to Atlanta with B'Tselem to receive the Carter Medal Human Rights Award in 1989. So, I mean, it's possible. It's not impossible. They are there. But the political leadership is not there yet. And the only way they can be made to be there is through accountability. They have been going on with impunity for decades, not just this government,
How are they
but previous government.
to be made accountable?
Well, the ICC indictment is one. What we're calling for in the main coalition for Palestine, an arms embargo. We have to stop the flow of arms to continue to enable Israel to do what it's doing in Gaza and the West Bank. You have to really push. I mean, right now, politically, Israel is a pariah state, politically. But it is only surviving because of the US and Germany.
Right.
You know, continuing to give them arms, continuing to provide diplomatic cover, continuing to prevent any kind of accountability mechanism, including the International Criminal Court, which gets sanctioned by the US government, including the ICJ, which has been threatened, including the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Occupied Territories, Francesca Albanese, who is now sanctioned by the U.S. because she makes a human rights report that tells us like it is. Tells us like it is. Facts documented.
So, arms embargo.
Can I finish answering your question? I'm sorry.
Take whatever time you need.
No, just finish answering your question. How do you make it happen? You start with accountability, right? Then you establish, what I would do, this is how I would do it, you hold people criminally accountable for violations of humanitarian law, for commission of the crime of genocide, etc., etc. You hold an international conference with representation of everybody, including Palestinians, and here I'm talking about Palestinians in all of their legal statuses, the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, the Palestinians who are in the refugee camps and who are stateless outside, as well as Israelis, right? And others, and begin the process of unpacking the truth of the history and trying to build upon that truth of the history to create a new political dynamic. Without that, it's not going to happen. If you keep looking for political, quick, easy, I can feel good because, I support the Palestinians now, let's give them a state. That's not going to resolve it. It doesn't resolve the issue of the refugees. It doesn't resolve the issue of minority rights of the Palestinians inside. The Palestinians in Israel are my family. This is what a lot of people don't understand, Harold. We are one family. You have, families that are, some who are in Gaza, some who are citizens of Israel, some who are in the West Bank, one family. They cannot get together anymore. They cannot see each other anymore. My parents came to Palestine for the first time since 1948, in 1996, just before I left the West Bank, Ramallah. They saw cousins of theirs in Nazareth and Haifa that they hadn't seen since 47. Why should that happen? Why should that be allowed to happen? So the truth of that experience has to come out. It has to come out, And Palestinians have done violence to Israelis, for sure. I mean, the suicide bombings and the missiles that went from Gaza across, of course. Put that all out. In human rights terms, we call these processes truth commissions. And they are of two kinds. They're truth and reconciliation commissions, but they're also truth and justice commissions. So they're slightly different in how you approach them, right? But without this kind of truth building, you will not be able to come to a solution. I'm convinced of that.
So I think, it's very difficult to argue with a man that says he's for human rights and for protection of minorities and all of these things, and there needs to be accountability for violation of human rights. I don't disagree with that, but I think it's very difficult to achieve among human beings.
Yes.
And we have a lot of countries where there ought to be truth and accountability commissions.
You're absolutely right.
All over the world, and so we start with Iran and Pakistan. We start with the leaders of non-democratic leaders of some Arab countries that say we got to eliminate the Jews.
Nobody's ever said that in 60 years, 55 years.
Maybe Nasser said it.
Yeah, Nasser died in what? In 71?
No, I'm saying, but I've run into a couple of people that may not be
but we can't hold on to that,
No, but I'm just saying that it's not just Israel. There's a lot of places.
I'm not saying it is.
Oh, I know you.
But, as a Palestinian, that's my concern. That's my concern. But politically...
I'm just saying, where you start, it's very hard to achieve. I hope it can be achieved. I'm 100% in your corner and trying to achieve this, but it has to be achieved many places in the world.
Let me say that I think you're absolutely right. It does have to be achieved in many places. You look at Ukraine, you look at Russia, all of that stuff,
Yeah.
right? But I think it's a bit easier to achieve than the expectation that there will actually be a viable state in the West Bank and Gaza, that the Israelis will ever allow, if they are left to their devices, that they will ever allow a state in the West Bank and Gaza.
Okay, I agree.
I think if you hold them accountable, if you push them, if you implement an arms embargo, if you tell them through action and not just through, come on, I spoke with Bibi, I patted him back,
Well, you get
I hugged him.
yeah,
No,
I agree.
right?
Yeah.
So you've got to push that.
Yeah.
And if you do that and you say, okay, we are going to start a process of truth to bring it as a, I was part of a discussion in Harvard with a very well-known human rights scholar, Henry Steiner, who about truth and reconciliation commissions. And I made the point at the time, here you're talking about the early 90s, Harold, right? I made the point of, we usually think about truth and reconciliation and truth and justice commissions as a process after a war is over. We're all done. Let's now open up the files, hold people accountable. That's what they did in South Africa at the end of apartheid, right? So let's talk about, how we're going to move forward now that, we've closed off the, but they can be a process for building a political solution, for stopping a conflict. So that's what I'm hoping, would be the case. The fact that it happens everywhere else in the world, yeah, and I can tell you all the horrible things that all of the Arab states are engaged in. I would not be proud to be a citizen of any of the Arab states.
We have to wrap it up, but this has been very interesting, and you gave us all some things to think about, and some difficult problems that many think are insoluble.
Yeah, but Harold, if I may just have one last sentence, which is to say, it's always possible if we get past our assumptions about the past. We have to think in a new way.
On that, we're going to end. The time goes fast.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
When you're having fun.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is terrific. So now we can, we're off the air. So.